Welcome to more World of Warplanes content from the Noble Q, and in this video I'll look at the Tier 7 tech tree German ground attack aircraft, the Messerschmitt Me 265. Hello there, and on the tarmac outside my hangar is the Messerschmitt Me 265, and this is a true paper plane. It was a design project only, coming about in 1942 and intended to replace the Messerschmitt Me 210, and that gives you a clue as to its intended role. It was meant to be a heavy fighter, or Zerstörer. It was rejected in favour of the Messerschmitt Me 410, which was no more of a success, because that project reused more of the components from the Messerschmitt Me 210. In World of Warplanes, it's not a heavy fighter. Its role is that of a ground attack aircraft using bombs and heavy weaponry, forward-firing weaponry. So what we're going to do now is take a look at the numbers. If you don't want to look at a spreadsheet, there's a link below and you can skip ahead to another part of the video. Here we are with the spreadsheet for all of the Tier 7 ground attackers. There are just the 3 of them. I've also included partial information for the Tier 7 bombers because I want to have a discussion about those later on in this segment. If you don't know how this spreadsheet works, there's a link in the description below to an instructional video. Have a watch of that and then you'll know what's going on here. Gun armament. Well, we've got a rating of 40, supposedly second best in class, but the cumulative DPS is 640 and that's best in class. So what's going on here? Well, the rating for the IL-8, the Soviet ground attacker, has been bumped up by the enormous range on the pair of 45mm cannons, which is 4,000 feet. That's an advantage if you're attacking ground targets. However, it's not great. Certainly these guns are not great for shooting at other aircraft. In fact, they're useless. And that's something that differentiates the Me-265 from the IL-8. The Me-265 can, and indeed should, shoot down other aircraft. Main armament on the Me-265 is a pair of 30mm cannons with 180 DPS, rate of fire of 240, but a fairly short range of 1890. Pay attention to the auto-aim angle. You only get 1 degree here. Well, it's better than the Soviet one, where you get none at all, which means that you can be off target by 1 degree and the game will correct your aim for you. This means you're going to have to aim pretty precisely if you are trying to shoot down aircraft. 0.6 dispersion angle, the way the shells spread out as they leave the muzzle of the gun, is fairly standard for cannons. You will wish that the overheat was not just 8 seconds, particularly if you're shooting at ground targets, armoured ground targets, and trying to get them to burn and be destroyed. This is a little bit on the short side. Shell velocity, you're not going to worry about the shell velocity too much. You're not dogfighting. Aircraft banking away from you is not normally going to be an issue. You'll see that the shell velocities on all 3 weapons groups here are vastly different. But again, as this is not a dogfighter, not going to be too much of a problem. Secondary armament is a pair of 20mm cannons, 110 DPS, rate of fire 420, better range, 2,559 feet. Again, that auto-aim angle just 1 degree, 0.6 dispersion angle. Overheat time slightly better at 10 degrees, and the shell velocity is 1400. These are going to be your all-purpose guns. Yes, they will do damage to ground targets, particularly soft ones, not so much armoured ones, but they will also be the most useful guns for shooting down ADAs and heavily damaged enemy aircraft. And for the purpose of shooting down aircraft, because I don't think these are going to make any difference whatsoever of shooting at ground targets, you have a pair of 7.92mm machine guns. 30 DPS, rate of fire 1200, 1444 range. Auto-aim angle is much better at 3. Dispersion angle is pretty typical for machine guns of 0.8. Overheat 30 seconds. And these are going to be excellent for finishing off badly damaged aircraft. And again, you will want to do that even when your cannons have overheated, unless you've got enough buttons to somehow separate these 3 weapons groups. Lucky you if you have, because I can't do that. These will be very useful for just finishing off aircraft and perhaps flipping a sector. Gun armament, 113mm machine gun, 128 DPS, range is a little bit short at 2,200 feet. You compare it to the Soviets, even though the DPS is less, you can shoot at a much greater range, which means you may get a critical when the enemy is still out of range, particularly the engine, and that will allow you to escape. Nonetheless, this will probably deter ADAs. It may be able to deter human fighters. It will not deter, by and large, a determined attack by a heavy. So from this armament, it's not classical armament for destroying ground targets. It's kind of a hybrid, I would say. It will do work at ground targets, but you are going to struggle to destroy armoured sections. You may overheat your cannons and have to wait for the overheat cycle to complete before you can actually finish off an armoured section. However, you have got the flexibility to be able to shoot down aircraft, and that's important. Other ground attackers in particular, the Soviet IL-8 should be a prime target. You need to be careful with your IL-10. We'll explain that shortly. And in that way, you can supplement your ground attacking abilities by taking out enemy aircraft and flipping sectors that way. Disarmament is good enough to do that. Ordnance. And it's a good job that armament can do that job, because the ordnance is pretty poor. It's only 250 kilogram bombs. You're going to have to do everything you can to try and improve that damage of 8,800. However, there is one significant plus point. That's the resupply time of only 50 seconds. And you'll be able to get that down to 35 if you try hard, maybe even less. Damage radius is okay at 246, but do try to bomb the exact point you want to bomb. Don't be off target, because you'll find that you won't destroy your ground target. No rockets. Now, the Soviets have got much better payload. There is a penalty for that, which we'll explain later. They have similar sorts of bombs to the Me-265 in terms of their ability to do damage, but their reload time is much longer, 40 seconds. Wow, whopping 40 seconds longer at 90 seconds each. However, they do have 8 rockets as well, capable of doing 9,600 cumulative damage. Again, the reload is 90 seconds, and the range of those is about 3,300 feet. Just cast your eyes sideways and have a look at the ordnance figures for the bombers. You'll see they're a lot higher. We'll come back to that. Survivability of the aircraft, there's a trade-off here. The survivability for a ground attacker is not high, but then you're gaining in terms of speed and maneuverability, which I prefer. So I'm quite happy to have a lower survivability if I have those advantages. It's 25 rating, 900 hit points, 55 damage resistance, which is sort of okay. Fire resistance is 70, which is pretty good. It's not a tank like the Soviet IL-8. As you can see, that has a rating of 35, 300 more hit points, better damage resistance figures and fire resistance figures. The IL-10, however, is a bit more fragile because it's really got a slightly different role. It has the same hit points as the Me-265, slightly better fire resistance and damage resistance figures. However, in compensation for that, you have much better airspeed on the Me-265, and I think in today's game this is critical. Rating is 44, cruise speed 256, boost speed 373 miles an hour, boost duration 15 seconds more than the Soviets, and boy, does that really hurt the Soviet ground attackers. Not going to probably employ diving tactics very frequently in this aircraft, although you can get above the Soviet ground attackers, and indeed you should, to make them struggle to point their nose up at you if they're trying to threaten you. 435 feet per second. And this speed is enough to be competitive with the bombers. And that's important. We'll come back to that as well. I will say straight away that the lack of speed, particularly on the IL-8, really makes this machine struggle. It may have more ordnance, but it's still outclassed by that of the bombers, and it's nowhere near as quick as them. You've got to really think about where you're going to take a Soviet ground attacker these days, and I'm afraid from Tier 7 onwards, it only gets worse and worse and worse, because the bombers get more and more powerful, and the Soviet ground attackers don't keep up. Maneuverability. It's certainly going to outturn the IL-8, and if you are going into a sector and you find an IL-8, make sure you shoot it down. Indeed, if a sector is unlocked and the IL-8 has lumbered its way to the edge of the sector but hasn't yet escaped, shoot it down. Maneuverability is 25, turn time 16.6 seconds, roll rate, you're not going to be doing a lot of rolling, don't worry about it. You'll stall out at 81, which is higher than the Soviets. Be careful, they may slam the brakes on to try and make you overshoot them. And your range of where your performance doesn't degrade is 161 miles an hour across 137 to 298 miles an hour. As I say, you'll easily outmaneuver an IL-8. Pay attention. If you see an IL-10 in a sector that you are thinking of attacking, you have two choices. Catch it unawares and shoot it down, or leave and go and do something else, because it will outmaneuver you most likely. And there's a Tier 8 ground attacker, the IL-10M, fairly rare Chinese premium, but if you see that, that will outmaneuver you all day, and you will be making a serious mistake if you engage that in a dogfight. You will probably lose your aircraft unless the bot or the pilot of it is a duffer. It's got maneuverability figure of way over 40. Be warned. Altitude performance, it's ground attack You don't need altitude performance, although tier 10, you can actually get the tier 10 German ground attacker up to shoot down bomber flights. You're probably not going to be trying to do that with this one. Use what you've got to position yourself above Soviet ground attackers or anything else flying low, and then point down, because they're going to struggle to point upwards. But really, it's not a major feature of this aircraft. Now, I think we better talk about tier 7 bombers. There are 3 of them: the Junkers 288A, the Tu-2, and the B-32. Now, at first blush, the ordnance figures on at least 2 of those may look quite frightening, and certainly all 3 of them have better ordnance. Now, of course, they can't shoot down targets with the forward-firing weaponry. There is none on the Junkers 288. It's slight on the Tu-2. I suppose you might fly a B-32 at 0 feet and try and shoot at ground targets. Don't think many people try that. The key thing here is do these bombers completely outclass the ground attackers? And I think the answer is no. The Junkers 288 is horrifically inaccurate with its bombs, even though it's got much better ordnance, and it's also lightly armed, which means that you're caught betwixt and between with the Junkers 288. If you want to land your bombs, you need to come low, but if you come low, you're probably going to get shot down by fighters and heavy fighters, and you'll spend quite a lot of time in the hangar. Even though the ordnance is better, that means that the Me-265 can still do a job, because the Junkers 288 may be spending quite a long time out of the game. However, at the start of the game, it's particularly if you've got human bomber pilots, then this applies across the board, it might be worth keeping an eye on where they're going and go somewhere else rather than go to the same sector, because you might have the frustration of finding that they bomb out that target before you're able to do anything. And if you're on a Soviet ground attacker, that's definitely going to be the case. Later on in the game, the B-32, you need to watch where it's going. If it's going towards the sector, pick another one. If the enemy B-32 is going to come in and flip your own sector, it might be worth hanging around there so you can flip it back after it's done its work. Tu-2. Is this much of a problem? I haven't actually flown this aircraft, but from the look of the stats, I'd fly this a little bit like a pseudo fighter, pseudo orthodox bomber, pseudo ground attacker. I'd be flipping it about all over the place. The ordnance is still better than the Me-262, and it reloads just as quick, but in all honesty, I don't think it's going to really bother you, provided you pay attention to where it is and what it's doing, and don't try and duplicate its efforts, because then you might find it does 90% of what you wanted to do, and you're left just going, oh, well, I can finish off a gun emplacement, or worse, nothing at all. And the B-32, you're a bit quicker. That's the good news. The bad news is if it goes into a sector, it's going to plaster everything and probably flip it. So try not to follow your own B-32 around. Do keep an eye on any enemy B-32s for potential quick flips of sectors you're nearby, because then you can wait 30 seconds, go in and take them. The long and short of it is, I don't think you'll find necessarily that you're going to be outclassed by tier 7 bombers. And even the tier 8 bombers aren't that much of a problem, except the grossly overpowered B-29C. I'm afraid there's nothing you can do about that other than just wait for it to flip sectors and then hang around and try and flip them back as it goes off and does it again somewhere else. I hope one day the World of Warplanes team will find the time to rebalance that aircraft. For now, you're just going to have to grit your teeth and bear it. So, can you have fun games in this plane? I think it's flexible enough with its manoeuvrability and its airspeed, and the quick reloading of the ordnance, even if it's not powerful ordnance, to make this a fun and challenging aircraft to fly. So I think the next thing to do is go and see how I've set it up. Here we are with the Me-265 back on the ground. My aircraft is specialised. I have all of the equipment and consumable slots available. When you first get this aircraft, you'll be missing an equipment slot on the cockpit. No gun sight, no cockpit armour. More critically, in my view, if you're one of those who want to try and improve the reload speed, you're missing the outboard weapon slot as well. So you're going to get the full effect of 50 seconds reload on the bombs. As far as the consumables are concerned, you'll be missing the slot for the turret, which means no improved ammunition, and also the one for the outboard weapon, which means no improvement on the damage potential of the bombs. So stock, I think this aircraft's going to be pretty unpleasant to fly. Let's pop it back into specialist configuration and see what I've done with all of the slots that I have available. 2 choices on the cockpit, really. There's the gun sight or the cockpit armour. Now, I happen to think that the tank build, which used to be a good build for ground attackers, is probably less so these days, given the amount of fast bombers in the game. So I opt for the gun sight. And with the gun sight, there's a bonus characteristic that I particularly like to get, and it's the 10% chance of causing a fire. This will help you burn down targets as you fire at them, and that's important because the guns can struggle to take out armoured targets. You may need 2 passes, but if you set them on fire and they blow up as you're going for your second pass, that's going to be a positive advantage to you. I've opted for 10% critical damage there because you will be shooting at other aircraft, particularly other ground attackers, particularly Soviet IL-8s, and trying to take them out. But you're also able to take out ADAs if they fly in front of you, or indeed enemy aircraft. So that's a useful thing to have. If you clip their wing or tail and thus make them less manoeuvrable, you're going to have more chance of shooting them down. And I've got 5% accuracy when firing at moving targets there. Let's just go and see the other characteristics. You might go for more critical damage. I don't think there's any point in having 3% more accuracy unless you're going to really try and take down aircraft all the time in this, which is not really what a ground attack is for, but you might do that, I suppose. I think probably the better one to pick there is 5% resistance to injuries for the pilot, but I'm happy enough with that set of bonus characteristics. We'll let it stand. Now, I think speed is important for a ground attacker, given that the bombers are pretty quick for the most part, apart from the American ones. However, your alternative choice to a polished skin, which is what I've got mounted here, I think would be either the lightweight wing frame, and it's taking a while to come up, here we come, for a little bit more manoeuvrability. It's not really a serious contender in my viewpoint, but if you are really wedded to the idea of shooting down aircraft, this is a piece of equipment you should consider. I think it's more important to get around the map quickly as possible, so polished skin for me. But if you're going to go for the tank build, then probably I'd go for the reinforced airframe and improve the hit points. The reinforced skin and gives you better resistance to damage for your control surfaces, but this isn't a dogfighter, so I don't think that's as important. So probably one of the bottom 3, and for me, it's the polished skin. If you're going for the tank build, it's a reinforced airframe, and if you must try and stay on target when you're fighting other aircraft as long as possible, then you'll go for the lightweight wing frame. Not my choice, though. Forward-firing weaponry. I've got the reinforced bolt carriers mounted. That gives me extra burst length. Well, I was complaining in the statistics section that the burst length on the 20mm and the 30mm cannons will feel a little bit short, so I've opted to increase it. At the moment, it's 15%, or very nearly 16% increase here. I've also sped up the cooldown by 15% from these bonus characteristics, and I've then picked off the bonus characteristic for an extra 5% burst length. I think you will really feel the benefit from that. What else could you do? Well, the range on the cannons is a little bit short, particularly the 30mm. I suppose if you want to start shooting earlier, you will pick long gun barrels. I do not think there is a lot of virtue in picking off the gas-operated action and increasing your rate of fire. That's really trying to take down enemy aircraft as quickly as possible. And although it's important in this plane, it's not its prime function. So for me, the reinforced bolt carriers are the best choice. Consider the long gun barrels if you want to start shooting at things earlier with the 30mm. Outboard weapon. There are 2 ways to go here, in my opinion. And my opinion, for me, the way I fly, I want that ordnance to reload as quickly as possible. So I've put on the strengthened hard points. This has an adverse effect on speed, which is why I've mounted the polished skin. But I've also picked off bonus characteristics there that improve my bombing reload speed by another 10%, my bombing accuracy, and then I've opted for a bonus characteristic of 1% cruise speed. If you're going to go for another choice, I don't think there's much point in the bomb sight or the rocket sight. Well, there's no point in the rocket sight. This machine has no rockets. You're going to be close enough to your targets not to need the accuracy of a bomb sight. If you really want to motor around the map and you're prepared to accept that your reload speed is going to be pretty low, and if you go for a tank build, it becomes more so that you might pick this piece of equipment, aerodynamic pylons. Not for me. I want the reload speed down as quickly as possible. Let's just pop along. We can see there that I've got the resupply down to 39. I reckon you could probably get that around to about 35 if you really push it. I haven't looked at every single option there to try and improve that, but 39 seconds and an 11-second improvement is great for me. Fire resistance is good enough to mount the first aid kit. I like to mount the first aid kit whenever I can. This is a 2-man crew, so it's really important because you've got double the chance of losing one of them. Then I go in for engine cooling for a 10 seconds more boost, bring it up to 55 if I've got full boost available. And then I've mounted gold ammunition. That's because I'm trying to get rid of this absurd amount of gold. I think universal will be plenty fine enough for you. Do, if you've got the consumables and can afford it, put on universal. With the turret, again, put on the universal. Or if you can afford the gold, then put on the gold. maximum chance of the gunner inflicting critical damage. That can be quite important, of course, can deter particularly ADAs from following you if you can shoot out their pilot and engine. And then I've got the heavy warhead. Again, pick the improved fragmentation if you can and increase the damage output. And if you can bear the cost of the gold, do so more so. Okay, I think at that point we need to talk about crew skills. Here we have the crew dialogue box. It's focusing on the pilot at the moment. Now, the Me-265, of course, is not a premium aircraft, so you are going to dedicate a pilot and a gunner to this plane. And for my build, which focuses on speed primarily, I've got what I would call a set of skills which emphasize that quality of the aircraft. But under any circumstances, I think the first skill you want is Demolition Expert. And that increases the damage caused by your bombs by 10%. Very important, in my opinion. My build then, I would have gone for Aerodynamics Expert next, and then I've concentrated on getting Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2. And from here, when I get another free skill point, I will probably take Fire Resistance off and probably put on Cruise Flight. Tank builds, I suspect, are fairly rare these days, but if you're going to go for a tank build, you probably want to do it a bit differently. Demolition Expert still first, then probably Protection Expert, and then possibly build up the Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2, but you're taking a hit on speed with the tank build. Of course, you can use aerodynamic pylons to mitigate that. At no point in either of those two possibilities, and there are others which I'll touch on, have I talked about accuracy of guns. Now, the Me-265 can and should shoot down aircraft when it gets the chance, but it's not its primary role. Primary role is destroying ground targets, and that's where you'll be pointing the weapons most often, in my opinion. You don't need a lot of accuracy to fire at ground targets, so therefore I'm not prioritising Marksman 1 or Marksman 2. Further skills beyond Cruise Flight, which I haven't yet got, that's a long way in the future, so we'll leave that be for the moment. By that time, you should understand what cruise skills are all about, and you can make your own informed choices. You don't need me to advise you. On the gunner, tend to go a fairly standard way with gunners. I like to get defensive fire first to try and reduce the damage that enemy aircraft can do to me by 30%. I then like to get precision gunner, because that targets vulnerable sections of enemy aircraft, i.e. it does criticals, and that can deter them from following you. You might actually want to swap the order in which you get these two. My preference is to get defensive fire, but there is a strong argument for getting precision gunner. This is interesting. I've actually got 4 points here, and I'm very close to getting a 5th point. Normally, I wouldn't load the armourer skill at this stage because it increases the burst length of a turret by 50%. Well, when have you ever seen a turret stop firing because it's overheated? I don't think it does. I really ought to have that on quick reflexes at the moment, and that allows the turret to aim 50% more quickly. However, when I get the next free skill point, I would probably drop quick reflexes, put armourer back on, not because I want it, but because it leads to this skill, the ballistics expert, and that increases the range of fire of a turret by 10%. And the range of the turret is a little bit short on this aircraft, so that's going to be a valuable skill to have. And then I'd go back and work my way up to the quick reflexes skill. Beyond that, you've only got a choice of 3 skills. These are useful, but I'm quite happy to take them off in favour of getting some of these skills. Weakest link, I've never actually used it on any aircraft. I think the uses of this particular skill are so limited that it just really isn't that important. Let me know if you think differently. So that's the way I have configured my pilot and my gunner, and I've also suggested how you might do it differently for the pilot in particular if you've got a tank build. Let's go and have a look at the post-build effects of all my choices. Here's a spreadsheet summarizing the post-build effects of all the choices I've made, and there are 7 sources of choices, including a chrome skin that I've put on this aircraft, which I haven't mentioned before, on the base figures of this Me-265. The base figures, which you will have seen before if you looked at the aircraft statistics section, are in C and D. The effects are listed in columns E and F. The absolute difference is in column G, the percentage difference in column H. For comparison purposes, I have also put together a tank build. That's in I and J, and K and L summarise the differences there. We'll talk about that later. What's the effect on the guns? We won't dwell on the slight improvements on the auto aim angle and the dispersion angle for all of the guns. That's nice to have, but it's not going to make much of a difference. What will make a difference, in my opinion, is the increase in burst length. Not on the machine guns, although they've gone up to 36 seconds. But the 20mm cannons are now over 12 seconds. The 30mm cannons are now over 9.5 seconds. And as it's important to try and knock down ground targets, the more burst length you have, in my opinion, the better. So I'm really happy with this improvement. No effect on the defensive armament as usual. Ordnance, we've got a fairly significant improvement up to 20. It's still not massive compared to some of the other aircraft in this game that you're competing with, the Soviet ground attackers, the bombers. But it's a 66.7% improvement. That comes from damage going up to 11,616. That's really nice. For me, the really key thing is the improvement in the resupply time, down from 50 seconds down to 38 seconds. And you could do better. If you really tweak the equipment, you'll probably get that down to, I don't know, 36 maybe, 35 if you really try hard. Damage radius has gone up to 325 feet, which is a nice increase. You can afford to be a little bit more inaccurate. Survivability, there's a hit on the damage resistance of 10 points. I'm going to take that. The key one for me here is that the fire resistance hasn't been reduced. Airspeed, mixed bag. You've got the polished skin, improving airspeed. I've also got Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2. However, the strength and hard points have offset that to a degree. So we have got an improvement of 2 points. The cruise speed has gone up nicely by 27 miles an hour. That's a 10.4% increase. However, we have lost 11 miles an hour on the top speed under boost. Personally, I think the cruise is more important. Generally, you won't necessarily be boosting between sectors because you're waiting for your ordnance to reload, even with a 38-second reload. And in all honesty, I don't think you'll miss 11 miles an hour when you're trying to get between sectors either. Maneuverability is taking a slight hit, 1 point there. There's a 0.3 degradation in the turn time. As we'll see from the other characteristics when we go below, there's also an effect on the yaw maneuverability. But other than that, everything's pretty much the same. Small but irrelevant increase in the climb rate of 10 feet per second to 200. We look at the things that aren't listed in the UI, which are helpful. 80% chance of causing criticals. A large part of that comes from the gold ammunition, I'm afraid, but that really will help you deter aircraft pursuing you. You'll shoot out their pilot, shoot out their engine quite often, and you may even make them wallow about sufficiently so that you can shoot them down in full because they can't catch up with you. The next characteristic I think is irrelevant because I don't think there's a burst length on the turrets. We've talked about the burst being improved. Guns cool down 15% quicker. That's really helpful. Forward firing guns do 10% chance of criticals. Quite useful if you're trying to knock down an ADA or an enemy aircraft to finish off a sector. This is the key one though, 10% chance of fire. That applies both to aerial targets and ground targets. And since the armor ground targets can be a little bit difficult to get down with the guns, if you set them on fire, that's really useful. Increase of 5% bomb accuracy, not that relevant in my opinion. Survivability, there are some good effects here. The tolerance to damage from fire is up by 20%. Gunner is resistance to injury up by 20%. Fire extinguishing speed up by 20%. That's good. You've got a 12% decrease in the pilot's resistance to injuries, hence the first aid kit. Airspeed, 9.5 acceleration while diving, irrelevant in my opinion. But the 5% acceleration, both with boost and without boost, is quite nice to have. And there's that maneuverability effect. The yaw has decreased by 1.8%. The other build is with cockpit armour, reinforced airframe, which I think is the correct choice if you're going to go for a tank build. I don't think there's a lot of virtue in improving your controllability of your aircraft if your control surfaces are destroyed. That's your wings and your tail. That would be the choice, what a reinforced skin would do for you. So reinforced airframe for me. I've also put on long gun barrels to try and improve the range. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. And in fact, if I was doing a tank build, I'd probably still keep the reinforced bolt carriers. But for illustrative purposes, here it is. And then also aerodynamic pylons to improve the speed. And that's going to have an effect on your reload speed of your bombs. The rating of the guns has actually gone up by 1 point to 41. The main effects here, I think, are on the range. And they're not in green. But you can see that the range of the machine guns has gone up to 1593. That's neither here nor there, really. The range of the 20mm cannons up to 2823 feet. That's quite useful. Let's just copy that there. Pop that there so it does go green. Go. be able to hit things at longer range, possibly useful if you're trying to just finish off a fleeing heavy at very long range. And then the range on the 30mm cannons has gone up to 2,085 feet. For my money, these increases in ranges are not enough to encourage me to go for long gun barrels. I don't think the effects on the range are significant enough for me to say, yes, I want that, especially in view of the fact that by mounting long gun barrels, you have a bad effect on your overheat cycles. Down to 26 seconds on the machine guns, well, that's not so much of a bad effect, but I think it is a bad effect to take your 20mm down to 8.8 seconds and your 30mm down to 7.7 seconds. And I think this is going to make it much harder to destroy ground targets, which is your primary role. For me, the long gun barrels are the wrong choice, but there you go. You can improve the range if you so desire. Ordnance, it's gone up to 15 from 12. That's the base. It's not as good as the improvement that I've managed to achieve. That's down to resupply time. I have actually managed to get the damage up to 12,204 here. That's 3,404, 38.7% increase, which is actually better than my preferred choice of build. But here's the resupply time, up to 55 seconds. Now, I guess if you may think that you can live with this, I regret it. I don't like it. I think if you're over a mining plant, you're going to feel every second of that 55 seconds waiting for bombs to try and damage a second significant target within the mining plant. You may feel differently. This, for me, means that I would not choose the aerodynamic pylons. Damage radius, again, is up to 325 feet. Now, as a survivability build, you would expect an increase. I think it's a bit disappointing, personally. It's only 16% on the rating, 29. Your hit points have gone up to 1,017. Your damage resistance is up to 57. Your fire resistance is up to 77. Okay, these are all good effects. Are they good enough to encourage me down this route? This day of fairly quick bombers? No, I don't think so. Airspeed, again, you've only got an improvement of 2 rating points. The cruise speed has gone up by 13 miles an hour. I prefer to have a higher cruise speed personally, but it's up to 269. Your boost maximum speed has gone up by 8 miles an hour. Not a terrific effect in my opinion. And you've also lost 5 seconds of boost. Okay, that probably isn't that important. Maneuverability, also a loss of 1 rating point here. Turn time is the same. Roll rate, okay, this is irrelevant. You're not going to be rolling this aircraft a lot anyway. So it's gone down by 7 degrees per second. Irrelevant. And again, although the improvement in climb rate is now 200 to 204, which is 14 feet per second, you're not really going to notice this. Let's have a look at the stuff that isn't listed in the UI. Again, you've got the 80% chance of criticals from the turret, really nice, but that's the same as the other build. Next characteristic we'll skip over, and then just a 5% chance of criticals off the forward guns. There is no chance, increased chance of fire, which I think is quite significant, and again makes me prefer the other build. No effects on the bombs and rockets. Survivability, well, as it's a tank build, you would expect good figures here. 35% tolerance to damage from fire, 32% gunner's resistance to injury improvement, 23% improvement to the pilot's resistance to injury, 20% fire extinguishing speed improvement is quite nice, I will say. Your tail's resistance to criticals is 10%, and you've got a 10% tolerance to damage from AA guns. Is this enough to encourage me down this route? Again, no. Airspeed, I can't quantify this for you. There's a 52% speed outboard bomb aerodynamics improvement on the airspeed. I'm yet to find the calculation that can illustrate this for you in the section above. So we'll just take it as read. And then we've got 5% acceleration, both with boost and without boost. Maneuverability, this time we've got an adverse effect on the yaw of 2.8%. Now you can mix and match these builds to a degree. Could go through the lightweight wing frame, for instance, perhaps taking off the long gun barrels and putting on the reinforced bolt carriers on the tank build and showing you that. The key thing here is that you've got 2 broad builds, and if you want to experiment with slight alternatives, drop into the test flight, pop on the equipment that suits you, and see how you feel about the aircraft. Okay, let's go and see how it performs in battle under my build. Map for the forthcoming battle is Road to Rome. It's the Call of Duty variant, 5-sector map, and it's a very squashed or deformed 5 spots of the die configuration. And what we have in the centre is an repair airbase, really important sector. Not only do you get your 3 resources every 5 seconds, but you can spawn there, always powerful when it's in the centre of a map. You can get a new aircraft of the same tier if you're destroyed, or you can get full repairs. That's provided you own this sector. Surrounding it are 4 garrisons. And given that I'm in the ME-265, the airbase is likely to be hotly contested by the majority of both teams. In fact, in my case, trying to take the peripheral sectors and putting pressure on the enemy by having, say, 3 of these garrisons and the airbase for at least half the game is the way to go. We'll look at the order of battle. Here we are. So as we can see, I'm top tier in my ME-265. I have for company a flight of P-51Ds, not the strongest aircraft in the game, and then a fairly similar Bf-109G, although the armament's different there. So 3 high-energy fighters, and then we also have an XP-54, a P-38J, both powerful heavies, and a very good turn fighter, the XP-55, as our tier 6s. The enemy has an ME-265, paired in a flight with a Key 94-1. Don't mistake this for the fighter aircraft. This is a heavy fighter. Huge weaponry, not very mobile. The enemy also has 2 P-51Ds. One's not specialised. And then they have a P-2M82, a P-39N-1, and a ME-410. So quite an interesting order of battle, and I can't really tell who's got the advantage here. As we go into battle, this is a natively recorded replay file. It's not one of World of Warplanes replay files, therefore you're going to be able to see me use the sniper mode and also the rear turret. Also, I'm on the southern spawn, not the northern spawn. And straight away, my objective is to try and capture garrisons as much as possible. Probably won't go to the airfield unless there's an opportunity to flip it very quickly, because that's where most of the teams will probably be, and then I'll be vulnerable. So accelerate towards the garrison off to my right. Pretty specific path that I take through this. The 2 bombs will take out the shed complexes. Here's the first. I like to soften up the rearmost 2 of the sheds in case the bomb hasn't got the necessary radius to do damage to those. So I like to soften them up. Got both of them, and that's flipped the sector. If we go to the enemy garrison, quite often the enemy will funnel through the other side of this rock, so it's a good way to avoid them. Sometimes you get somebody who has the same idea and you encounter, for instance, a stray ground attacker coming around this way. In the ME-265, if it's a Soviet ground attacker, I feel fairly confident I can deal it serious damage. So again, a fairly specific route in here. We'll shoot out this gun in front of me, but not the entire emplacement. We'll try and take out the tents just to its left, and then we'll try and get at the 2 shed complexes with the bombs. And they've reloaded. Sheds. Now it's time to concentrate on bombs, avoid the pylon that's in front of us. Slightly late for the bomb there, but it's okay. Swing for the next one. Popping up the sheds. Get that. Now we're going to try and finish off this gun emplacement. Target of opportunity. And that goes. There's another target of opportunity here, the one that I softened up previously. Got that, and it flips the sector. We've already got 7 targets destroyed. At that point I notice that there's something coming in behind me. I swing the aircraft around as quickly as possible. It's an ME-410. Fortunately, he doesn't choose to shoot at me. He then thinks about trying to turn with me, and gets a nasty surprise. I'm pretty mobile, especially with my turn fighting skills from fighters. I can actually fling this around a lot better than most heavies expect. He makes the mistake of scraping up for the other ground attacker. He does actually shoot it down, but now he's in such a weak condition that even with this auto-aim angle, I'm able to finish him off. So, when I'm in this ground attacker, heavies beware, you have to be really mobile, and the ME-410 is not mobile, and that gives me a fighting chance. Looking around to see if there are any threats, we're off to the next garrison, with 3 sectors to 2 up, although we don't have the airbase. Got the bombs back already. If I'd had aerodynamic pylons, I'd have got here a lot quicker, but the bombs wouldn't be ready, which would have limited me to shooting out unarmed targets by and large. Soften up the sheds again. Get ready to drop the bomb. Do the same with the next one. A little bit low, need to be careful here I don't crash. Drop the bomb. Now we've got tents in front of us that we can finish off. And here's where, with the lack of ordnance, is hampering us. Go and find tents to shoot for quick targets. And now we're really close to flipping the sector, but I'm running out of easy targets to go for. More sheds. Sorry, more tents. Now, just one target will do it. Can I get it done? We lose a garrison whilst I'm waiting. Now I've got to pick off an armed target. I've nearly got my bombs in. Trying to get this to blow up. I leave it. I leave one bunker up. And this proves to be critical. Get my bombs in, and something dies here. And instead of flipping the sector, I've still got more work to do. Come back to try and drop the bomb in this sector, but it's not going to be enough. Drop the bomb. Again, we're within a smidgen of taking this sector, but I'm finished off by the enemy. So we spawn back in at the original spawn point, so I can go for the local garrison. I'm already up to 14 ground targets destroyed. I took out 7 at that sector I failed to flip. Look at the aircraft in front of me. I'm looking for opportunities to take down unwary aircraft. Notice the heavies are actually banking towards me. I decide that I'll go at one of them. Set him on fire. Shoot at the other one. Turn because I'm thinking I should be able to turn with at least one of these heavies and perhaps knock it down. That's the one I want to shoot. A colleague of mine takes him out, and now I decide it's time for me to focus on taking out ground targets, which is my main job. With 3 sectors to 2 down, we want the sector as quickly as possible. Soften up with back to 2 sheds again. Drop the bomb a little bit inaccurately. Fortunately, I've got the extra radius on the bomb, so it doesn't matter. Soften up those sheds. Drop the bomb. The sector flipped, although I took the target out. I think the sector flipped before I actually destroyed that sector. And we're 3-2 up again. There's a fierce contest for the airfield, as usual, which we've now just lost. I dare say we'll probably flip it back, but it means that I'm under pressure to try and get this garrison. So it's going to be a similar attack pattern. Initially, take out the gun at the front. This gun emplacement that's in front of me, just slightly off to the left. Soon be directly in front of me as I straighten up. There we go. Try and take out the sheds and then the 2 shed complexes. I have to adjust my attack here, as you'll see in a moment. Sheds are taken out. I'm about to go for the shed complex. Sorry, the tents are taken out, and I see that the heavy comes in and destroys that target. So I go for the other shed complex. He hasn't got the ordnance to take it out at the moment. Then I go for these tents. Miss one of them. Very nearly get greedy. Still got a bomb there. I'm going to take out this. I actually do drop the bomb for the reload, but the sector's already. Now we're going for the other garrison that failed to flip earlier in the game. Don't need to worry about the heavy at the moment. Keep an eye on him. He's got plenty to occupy him up there. I'll probably get away. Fight game. We're down 3-2 again. Scores are almost level. We've just taken the airfield back, which will level up the scores in 10 seconds. Again, looking around for threats. Being present. My bombs are going to be back before I arrive at this sector. That's the virtue of having strengthened hard points, in my opinion. And now I can go for the shed complex. Shoot out the gun first. Do a little bit of work on the bunkers in case they burn down. Now let's get the bomb. Go. Shed 1, shed complex 1, now shed complex 2. Bomb away. Tents in front of me. It's worth learning good routes into sectors. It means you can be efficient and quick. Now I'm going to actually double back this time and try and shoot out the tents behind me. Go. If I can get some more sheds, tents rather, or finish off this bunker, we'll have the sector. There it goes. And that's 22 ground targets. Now, I'm heading towards the airbase. I'm going to pick up repairs and then think about attacking the last sector. However, we have now finally got on top of the game, even though it's now just reduced to 3 sectors to 2. There isn't a great deal more that happens. And there we have it. 5 chevron battle, quite a few medals, very nearly 17,000 personal points. Difficult matchup, I'm pleased with this victory. Let's have a look at the outcome of this battle, and as we can see from the middle, it's a 5 chevron battle or a grade 1 attack aircraft. That grossed 97,612 credits or silver if you prefer. 32,500 of that approximately came from a premium account bonus. If we look in the message box, we can see that there were 6,500 credits expended. That was for repairs, lost the aircraft once. I was using prepaid consumables, so no expenses there. Aircraft experience 3,271, the base is 2,111, premium account bonus 1,055, other bonuses accounting for 105. 163 free experience, 110 base, 52 premium account bonus. 1 token, that was a first medal of the day, that's the Thunder, and there it is. We've also got the Winged Legend and a Hero of the Sky badge. Personal score tab, we can see that all of the class-specific missions are complete, hence the 5 chevrons, 16,945 personal points, 5 sectors captured, 2 aerial targets destroyed, 1,074 damage to aerial targets, 2 criticals, lost the aircraft once, as I mentioned before, capture points 545, that's all for attacking, 22 ground targets destroyed, that's quite a lot, 77,820 damage. And if we go to the team score tab, we can see that by personal points that would have been first on both teams, by chevrons first on my team and equal first on the enemy team as well. Good contribution here from the XP55, down tiered and nearly 14,000 personal points, well done. Solid, if unspectacular contributions from the XP54, the 109G, the P38J. Unsurprisingly, these are experienced players, so the enemy flight came top with very nearly 14,000 points each from 5 chevrons and 4 chevrons there. Good effort from the PE2, down tiered as well, 10,000. This was quite a good battle to win. That concludes the review section for the Messerschmitt Me 265, and I think with a careful build, such as mine, this is still a competitive aircraft in most battles. I've emphasised bomb reload speed and the speed of the aircraft. There are alternatives which may suit your playing style better. There will be battles, such as those festooned with B-29Cs, in which you are not competitive, but by and large, you should do well in this aircraft. Well, I hope you found that useful, and that if you did, you'll come and see my future content. Do stick around, there's a bonus battle, unnarrated, coming up, but I'm going to leave you here. So this is the Noble Q, signing out.